He dressed simply, sitting quietly in first class with a platinum ticket in his pocket. But the only thing placed in front of him was a dry slice of bread and a glass of water. Other passengers were served wine and hot meals. But he was told, "This meal suits you." No one knew. That man was the CEO of the tech company about to merge with that very airline. And right after landing, a single phone call led to the entire flight crew being terminated. But behind that incident was a whole network of systemic discrimination, and a young woman had secretly recorded it all. Some flights begin with a polite greeting and end with a glass of wine glistening above the clouds. But Flight 219 from San Francisco to London that day didn't. It began with a suspicious glance and ended with a crash landing, not of the plane, but of an entire system running on bias. Marcus Ayers stepped into the first-class cabin with a dark leather backpack, no Rolex, no designer suit. He wore a charcoal crewneck tee and clean, understated sneakers. His hair was neatly trimmed, his eyes sharp like someone who'd learned to observe rather than speak. No one suspected he was the CEO of Citadel One, a data empire worth hundreds of millions. And that, in a first-class cabin, was the first problem. Flight attendant Brittany gave his ticket a quick glance. Her eyes paused on the name Marcus Ayers, then swept over him from head to toe, a look not quite hostile, but cold enough to chill like the ice in a glass of wine. "Oh, sorry, are you sure you're in the right cabin?" she said with a faint smile, laced with doubt. Marcus replied calmly, "I believe so. Seat 2A. She checked the ticket, frowned, but didn't offer an apology. She simply stepped aside to let him through. He said nothing, but the phone in his coat pocket had already started recording. Marcus wasn't flying for business. Not this time. He was on that flight to test something, a much-hyped smart service automation system the airline had been promoting. A system that claimed to prioritize customers with AI, no bias, no discrimination. But Marcus knew machines didn't need to learn prejudice. They only needed to learn from people. And within 5 minutes of sitting down, he had his first recording, a small moment, but enough to spark an expose that would shake the entire airline industry. Less than 20 minutes after takeoff, flight attendant Brittany wheeled the food cart through first class. The silver trays were opened, releasing the aroma of lamb in red wine sauce into the air, accompanied by golden French bread and a list of premium wines. Other passengers were served with warm smiles, some even greeted by name, followed by a cheerful "enjoy your meal." When she reached seat 2A, Brittany paused. A flicker of hesitation crossed her eyes. "Hello? Marcus," she said, slightly emphasizing the name as if she'd just learned how to pronounce it. "I'm sorry, your special meal didn't make it on board in time, but I can offer you some bread and water." Marcus looked up, his gaze calm. "I didn't order a special meal," she pressed her lips together. "Oh, must have been a system error. But for now, that's all I can provide." No further explanation, no alternative offered. She placed a small plate on the tray table, a single slice of dry white bread with a glass of water, no ice, no lemon, no tablecloth, no silverware, just a first-class meal for a passenger who didn't fit the system. To Marcus's left sat a middle-aged woman named Linda Calloway, a professor of anthropology. She frowned at the sight of his meal. "Surely that's a mistake," she whispered, concern in her eyes. Marcus smiled. "No. I think they're serving exactly how they intend to." He didn't touch the bread. His hands rested lightly on the armrests, eyes steady on the front of the cabin. The phone in his jacket pocket was still recording. Every word Brittany spoke, every glance of quiet disdain, it was all being captured. In economy class, a random passenger was live streaming from the flight. The camera happened to catch the moment Brittany placed the plate and glass in front of Marcus, along with her frosty expression and clear lack of respect. That video, at first shared with just a few dozen followers, began to spread within the hour. Because in a world of polished branding and performative equity, nothing hits harder than an unfiltered image, and nothing is more dangerous than a man like Marcus Ayers, silent, but watching everything. The tension didn't come from an argument, it came from deliberate stillness. And Marcus was counting every beat because he knew the real shift wouldn't come in anger, but in the moment when others believed he had nothing at all. The bread and water meal remained untouched on the tray in front of Marcus. The plane had reached cruising altitude, and soft ambient lighting was turned on for lunch service, Other passengers were sipping Italian wine and chatting animatedly about work, stocks, and coastal galas. As for Marcus, he pulled out his phone and opened an unusual app with a blue star icon, an internal interface accessible only to individuals at the highest clearance level. The app was called Helix One, a real-time operations and personnel monitoring system developed by Marcus's own company. And today, it wasn't being used to audit software. It was being used to observe how people behave when they think no one's watching. Marcus tapped into the crew profiles. Brittany, lead flight attendant, 3 internal warnings over the past 2 years for unprofessional behavior toward non-brand compliant passengers. One of those incidents involved a young autistic boy traveling with his single mother, whose request for a seat change was ignored. That file had been quietly locked by the airline's own HR manager. Marcus tapped record on the app. He dialed in, connecting via satellite. On the other end was Lori, his personal assistant, waiting for him at the New York office. "Do you want to proceed?" she asked as soon as she picked up. "Proceed," Marcus replied, curt. "Block all outgoing data except the passenger live stream. Encrypt cabin access, and Lori..." "Yes?" "Call the merger board. Change the meeting agenda to organizational culture. I'll present right after we land. No harsh words, no slammed fists, no raised voice." But in that moment, a quiet earthquake began to form. Not in the skies, but deep within the operational core of an airline teetering on the edge. And no one on board, not even Brittany, could have imagined that the black man in a hoodie and plain jeans was Marcus Ayers, CEO of Orbital Systems, the tech giant currently acquiring 51% of the airline's stock, and the one man with the authority to rewrite their future with a single command. Seat 3C by the left window sat a young woman around 26, her chestnut curls tied neatly back, holding an old Leica camera in her hands. Her name was Elena Cruz, a freelance journalist who had once written for a few local papers and had recently shifted to blogging independently about human rights in forgotten spaces. She wasn't a random passenger. Elena's first-class ticket came from a sponsored writing assignment with a fashion brand, but no one on the crew knew that. On the surface, she looked like an art student who had wandered into the premium cabin by mistake, with a backpack covered in stickers and a faded hoodie. But she had seen everything. From the moment Marcus entered the cabin, ignored, served last, to the point when Brittany handed him the meal tray with that bored expression and thinly veiled sarcasm. Elena didn't pull out her phone. She used her camera, capturing each moment. Marcus's eyes as he stared down at the dry piece of bread, the way his hand clenched and then slowly relaxed. Not because she knew who he was, but because she had once felt that same sting of being judged for not looking like the rest of the room. When Marcus made the call, Elena couldn't catch everything, but she was sharp enough to realize he wasn't just any ordinary passenger. And she understood even more when she saw the strange app he had open. Accessing an in-flight cabin monitoring system wasn't something just anyone could do. When Brittany came back to check the seats, Elena spoke up. "Could you tell me what's on today's menu? I'd like to jot it down. I'm a journalist." Brittany gave a forced smile, mumbled a vague answer, then walked off faster than usual. Elena hit record, opened her notes app, and began to type. Title: When a piece of bread says more than a first-class ticket. She had no idea the article would go viral in just 48 hours. She also didn't know that the man she was watching would completely shift the narrative she thought she was telling. But there was one thing Elena knew for certain. When everyone else stays quiet, that's exactly when the truth needs to be told. About 30 minutes after the meal service, the quiet in first class was suddenly disrupted by an unexplained shift in the flight crew's behavior. Claudia, the lead flight attendant, usually aloof and polished to the point of coldness, unexpectedly returned to Marcus's seat with the most strained smile she'd ever worn. "Sir, we apologize for the earlier inconvenience. I may have misunderstood your request. If there's anything else you'd like, we're happy to accommodate." Marcus didn't look up. His eyes remained on the flickering data panels within the SkyPulse internal app, where detailed personnel reports and passenger complaints about this crew were displayed. Claudia's name appeared at least 3 times in the last 12 months, flagged for inappropriate conduct toward black passengers, transgender passengers, and a Muslim traveler. Claudia leaned in slightly, adding, "We have red wine-braised beef and imported Merlot. Shall I set one aside for you, sir?" Marcus looked up, his gaze sharp and cold, speaking clearly for the first time. "Earlier, you said this meal was suitable for me. You think I'm not good enough for the beef?" The air tightened like a taut violin string. Claudia hesitated, but before she could speak, Brittany, the one who had directly placed the bread and water in front of Marcus, intervened, offering a defensive tone. "Sir, I might have been a bit tired earlier. I misspoke. I didn't mean anything by it." However, Marcus's eyes were fixed firmly on the device displaying the service order. The system had just logged that Brittany served champagne to the passenger in seat 3A before moving to Marcus, who held a platinum ticket. Other passengers in the cabin began to take notice. The atmosphere had become strange. From seat 3C, Elena clearly saw the concerned look on Captain Hollins's face as he stepped out of the cockpit. He exchanged a few words with Claudia, then glanced toward Marcus, the look of someone realizing they had misjudged someone gravely. None of them knew exactly who Marcus was, but they knew enough to recognize he had power, and he was silent. Silent like a storm forming beneath a calm sky. Silent like an unread sentence of judgment, but everyone could feel it. The more the flight crew tried to fix the situation, the more it became clear. They weren't apologizing for their mistake. They were apologizing because they were afraid. Elena Ross, 32 years old, a freelance journalist of Cuban descent, was sitting in seat 3C, just 2 rows behind Marcus. From the moment Marcus was given a dry slice of bread and a glass of water, her professional instincts went off. Not out of the usual outrage seen on social media, but because of her gut feeling, the intuition of someone who had uncovered 2 major scandals in the hospitality industry and a harassment case in the music business. She didn't know who the man in the simple turtleneck sweater was, but the cold treatment he received, it wasn't just bad service. It was deliberate. It had history. When Brittany arrogantly told Marcus, "This meal is suitable for you," Elena subtly tilted her phone, recording with the front camera without anyone noticing. She also caught a clear shot of Brittany's sneering glance and the quick look Captain Hollins gave when he left the cockpit. She recorded the conversation about the beef and the misunderstanding the crew later used as an excuse. But that was just the beginning. With a satellite SIM card installed, Elena's phone was transmitting data to a secure server in New Jersey. There, the software she had set up could process and organize the images and audio into small segments with complete annotations, ready to be used as investigative material. She even used her earbuds to record the entire whispered exchange between Claudia and Captain Hollins in the aisle, where they mentioned, "If he files a complaint, just say it was a service glitch. We've done it before with the other 3. Elena frowned. The other 3? Meaning, they had done this before? At this point, the light in the cabin dimmed. Some passengers began to sleep or put on headphones, but Elena was starting to truly wake up. She opened an encrypted messaging app and sent a short message to her former editor. "There may be an organizational-level discrimination scandal at Horizon Air. I have recordings, evidence, and a strange character in seat 2B. I suspect it's internal." The message was marked "delivered" after 1 second. Immediately afterward, Elena uploaded all the raw data to her encrypted storage platform for the investigative journalist she had collaborated with. She titled the file, "Your Bread and Water, Evidence in the Air." She looked up. Marcus remained silent, but his gaze seemed to flicker over her for a brief moment. Elena subtly nodded, as if signaling, "I'm on your side." She didn't need to know Marcus's true identity, but she knew one thing for certain. This time, the story would not be buried. Not as long as she was still on this flight. It wasn't by chance that the internal system was this corrupt. Someone had to be behind it. His name was Douglas Rayner, the former senior HR director of Horizon Air, now holding the position of strategic advisor for internal operations, a title that sounds harmless, but within the company, everyone whispered his true nickname, the Coordinator. He didn't appear in media reports. No one knew his face except for the upper echelons. But every complaint report, every internal evaluation, every piece of evidence regarding flight attendant misconduct, all had to pass through his desk. And most disappeared there. Rayner had a small office in a side building at Horizon HQ in Atlanta with no nameplate. On his desk were three phones, one for internal calls, one to contact the executive board, and one encrypted to talk to lawyers. He was the one who had cleaned up Claudia's disciplinary records 3 times, noting that evidence was insufficient or it could have been a misunderstanding from the customer. Rayner had worked in security. He knew exactly how to suppress a scandal, not with apologies, but by making the complainant weary. Delay. Reiterate the verification process. Make them submit their evidence again, this time through the new portal, a bureaucratic loop. He knew that racism couldn't be explicitly written in the handbook, but he also knew how to foster a silent culture. No need to say it out loud. Just let things go on long enough without anyone taking responsibility. People like Claudia, Hollins, didn't follow orders. They acted with the comfort of knowing they would be protected. That afternoon, when Marcus sent the first batch of messages through the Skypulse system, a copy was also sent to Rayner's office as part of the quality control process. And when he saw the name Marcus Livingston, he froze. Rayner had never met Marcus, but he had heard of him. The young black CEO, the head of the aviation tech company that had just signed a strategic partnership with Horizon Air. Marcus was the one pushing for customer service reforms towards non-discrimination. "Damn it," Rayner whispered. Immediately, he called an emergency meeting with the internal communications department while sending instructions to the flight attendants head on the flight. Change the tone. Be friendly. Soothe them. Everything can be recorded. Act as if nothing happened. Claudia received the message while making coffee. Passenger in seat 2B is a government VIP. Change your attitude immediately. No one knew it was a lie. Only Rayner knew. Marcus was the kind of person who could bring down the very foundation he had built over the past 15 years. And from that moment on, it was no longer an internal matter. It was a fight for survival. The young girl, Elena, had originally planned to fly back to New York to visit her mother after a summer internship in San Diego. She was a journalism student at NYU, smart, determined, and once a victim of discrimination. But no one imagined that she would be the one to fire the first shot in a nationwide media storm. When flight attendant Brittany placed the tray of food on Marcus's table, a dry slice of bread, a glass of water, and a sarcastic comment, "This meal suits you," Elena froze. She noticed every detail, the look of disdain, the tone, and the eerie silence from the other passengers. She pulled out her phone, not to record a long video, but just to capture that moment. She knew the media laws well. A video could be contested as edited, but raw, unedited audio was stronger than anything. At that point, she wasn't sure what she was going to do. But when, a few hours later, the flight attendants started completely changing their attitudes, offering wine, hot dishes, smiling awkwardly at Marcus as if nothing had happened, she was certain something was fishy, and she hated that fishiness. As the plane began its descent, Elena received a message from a classmate. "Are you on a Horizon flight? There's a rumor the airline's about to be bought by Orion Jet. Do you know anything?" Elena's heart raced. Marcus had introduced himself as someone in the aviation tech industry, and the way the entire crew had changed their behavior, it couldn't have been a coincidence. 20 minutes after the plane touched down, while passengers were still standing up to grab their luggage, Elena adjusted the audio file, added a short caption. "When you're a black man with a first-class ticket and still get treated like trash, your bread and water flights. No names, no mention of Marcus. No drama, just a real story and a 13-second recording." Claudia's voice was crystal clear. She posted it on X, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram Reels. In just 17 minutes, the video had over 12,000 views. Within an hour, the hashtag Your Bread and Water Flights was trending in the top 10 nationwide. A wave of people who had experienced discrimination on flights began to share their stories. And then an anonymous account @JetJustice appeared. This account started leaking internal evidence, photos from Horizon's internal system, statistics on complaints being covered up, even emails signed by Douglas Rayner, the man who had denied the racist incident last year. Elena didn't know who JetJustice was, but with just one click of post, she had inadvertently triggered a large-scale dissection of the underground culture of an entire industry. While Elena was quietly recording and Claudia made her sharp remark with the bread and glass of water, Marcus remained still, silent. No one knew that at that moment a storm of thoughts was raging inside him. His face was frozen, as if he had accepted the humiliating silence. But in his coat pocket, his hand was gripping his wireless earbud tightly, and his eyes flicked quickly to the signal board. The in-flight Wi-Fi was still active. Marcus had intended to remain silent. He had planned to let the airline destroy itself with the arrogance of the flight crew. But when Claudia came back, leaned over, and smiled, "We've heard you work in the aviation industry. Hope the meal doesn't affect your opinion of us." With a look that couldn't hide her sarcasm, that was the moment he decided, no more waiting. He took out his phone. Turning on the internal Wi-Fi calling mode, he searched for the special contact in his address book, Sierra Vaughn, the interim CEO of Orion Jet, the private airline quietly negotiating to acquire a large stake in Horizon Air. She was also the person he was secretly working with to develop an AI-driven flight attendant behavior monitoring system. The call lasted less than 3 minutes, but it was enough to change everything. "We're sitting on a media bomb, Sierra. If you want to keep the deal and have a smooth merger, now's the time to act." "What are you talking about? I'm being treated like trash. I don't need an apology. I need a storm. Do you have proof? No, but I will. I believe in the domino effect. And you have a little girl, seat 3C. She's staring at me. The redhead wearing silver headphones? That's her." Elena, a journalism student. Sierra was silent for a few seconds. "Are you sure you want this?" "More sure than ever." Marcus hung up, then took a deep breath. He still didn't know what Elena would actually do, but he trusted his instincts. And above all, he knew that call had sent a signal to the entire Orion Jet system. Any wrongdoing from Horizon, from this moment on, was no longer an internal matter. It was an opportunity to take down a competitor. When Claudia returned with a forced smile, offering a glass of French wine and foie gras, "Because you're a special guest," Marcus sat up straighter. He smiled, not because he was pleased, but because he knew the game had begun. The flight landed in New York on a mild afternoon. JFK Airport was as bustling as ever, and no one had a clue that one of the biggest media earthquakes in the aviation industry was about to unfold, just a few gates away from them. Marcus was the last to disembark. Claudia stood by the door, her lips trembling. She had realized her mistake, but it was too late. Elena hadn't just sent the audio clip to her classmate at Columbia University. She had also live-streamed a few minutes while still on the plane. The phrase, "this meal suits you," was captured up close, along with Claudia's expression of contempt, becoming the centerpiece of a video that garnered over 1.2 million views within just 4 hours of posting. The hashtag bread and water for the CEO spread like wildfire. The internet erupted, not because Marcus was the CEO, but because people saw themselves in that cold tray of food and the silent disdain. Within 48 hours, Claudia was suspended. Captain Rayner was investigated for the entire service process. An internal document leaked, revealing that he had previously received complaints about discrimination, which had been swept under the rug by the HR director, who coincidentally was the CEO of Horizon Air's wife. The first domino fell, and it took the whole line down with it. At Orion Jet's headquarters, an emergency shareholders meeting was held. Sierra Vaughn appeared on television announcing, "We are officially withdrawing from the merger process with Horizon Air. We are also releasing all data related to discriminatory behavior recorded by the Sky Pulse system." Everything exploded. 3 days later, Marcus held a brief press conference. He didn't blame anyone. He didn't demand compensation. He didn't name names. He simply shared, "When my daughter asked, 'Why didn't you eat anything on the plane?' I said, because sometimes you have to learn to say no to what doesn't deserve you, even when you're hungry." That statement spread stronger than the original video. Elena received a special scholarship from Orion Jet to continue her investigative journalism studies. Claudia disappeared from social media. Rayner submitted his resignation, and Horizon Air lost nearly 18% of its stock in just 5 days. But what pleased Marcus the most wasn't the collapse. It was the next day when he boarded another flight, again first class, and a flight attendant approached, bowed slightly, and said, "Welcome, sir. What hot meal would you like to have today?" Marcus smiled softly, not because of the meal, but because finally someone had truly looked at him as the person he always was.